Good afternoon, everybody. It is a cold, kind of gross and rainy day out here in the New England, northern Boston area. Hope the day is a little more brighter where you are, but we're about to get some sunshine going in here because I've got my Florida friend and my Arizona friend. How could you not have a sunshiny day talking to these two ladies? So today my name is Carmen Rojas. This is the roadmap to entrepreneurial marketing. This is the point of this series is to kind of help entrepreneurs out there learn all about marketing and how we can make marketing effective for us. You know, it's a different kind of beast when you're going from 0 to 10 or 0 to 100 than it is to go from 1,000 to 1,000,000. So we're looking for all these wonderful experts that can help us get to that point that we can scale our businesses in the directions that we want to go. So to do this series, I've teamed up with my good friend Stephanie Sims, and I'll let Stephanie introduce herself for us today. Hey, Stephanie, how's it going out in Arizona?
It's going great, Carmen, and thanks so much for having me on. I'm excited about this series, too. Basically, my role is to watch the money. That's what I do. I help business owners know their worth through a system that I call financeability. And the goal for me today is to help everybody understand how content and the things that Laura's going to talk to us about are going to help improve your bottom line.
Great. And without further ado, we will head to, I made a new word and I call it a friender. Because they're my friend/vendors, and I made that term specifically for Laura because she's such a good friend and an awesome lady, and also happens to be one of the vendors that we work with quite frequently over here. So, Laura, if you could tell us who you are, a little bit about what your passion is, what your experiences are, so we get a chance to know you.
Okay, thank you. I'm really glad to be here with both of you. I always enjoy any shows that I do with both of you. You always ask great questions, and it's always a lot of fun. I am the owner of Good Inklings, which is a business that does content writing, content marketing, and social media for other businesses all over. And what I try to do in that business is evaluate a client, find out what their needs are, who they're trying to get their message out to, and then build a message around that they can have a voice that's consistent across all aspects of their business marketing. So that's what I try to do. I got into writing all my life is basically the answer. I started doing it professionally almost 4 years ago. I mean, I'd done it off and on professionally, but I want to say it's my own business almost 4 years ago. And that was a progression from graphic design. When I would build websites for clients, they would ask to have the content written for the websites, and they were so thrilled with the content that I started looking into writing as another revenue arm and found out that I could make more faster writing. So that's what caused me to switch over. And it's not something I haven't regretted for one single minute. I absolutely love the writing on a professional and a personal platform. And I struggled with writing all my life. I mean, I wrote off and on different projects, but even though I went to school and took tons of writing courses, I was still scared to use my own voice. So once I started doing it for money, people are paying me and liking what I do, it opened up that whole world for me. So that's my story on writing.
That's a good story. And I'm going to start off just, again, kind of getting to know you and warming this up a little bit. Can you talk about that, maybe your background, I know, is in graphic arts, and so it was more, building websites and kind of more what we consider the artsy technical end of marketing. At some point, you kind of crossed over and became a writer. So maybe tell us about the time, the moment when you realized that this was it. That this is where you're supposed to be. You were supposed to be a writer. That's what you were put here to do. If there was one singular moment that solidified that for you, what was it?
I would have to tell you, mutual friend of ours, Charlotte Pierce, she's a publisher in the Boston area, And it was because of my relationship with her and her being excited about the things that I was doing, honestly, because it was added that authority to what I was doing. It wasn't like, my mom telling me I was good at it. It was somebody who really knew what they were talking about. So even though I had been writing for a long time and getting paid for it, that made me feel more valuable as a writer and has sent me into a lot of different directions on that. Then I do have to cry. I need to actually tell her that story because I haven't. I do credit a lot of that to Charlotte.
Okay. Well, and that brings up an interesting point, Laura, that I think a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with because, like you said, they're new, they're starting to get the website organized, they need all the other elements of starting their business. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. How can we know if what we're writing, either on our website, through a blog post or whatever, is actually connecting with our audience? What are some of the things we should look for so that we can get a measurement, right? So we can say, okay, I should really keep writing about this or I should stop writing about that.
Okay, I think the best way to answer that is not that I don't pay attention to the numbers, I do, but what I pay closer attention to is a conversation. If what I'm writing is starting a conversation, whether that conversation is a phone call from a potential client or somebody even in the writing business to say, validate that piece of writing, or it resonates with anyone, to me that is how you know that's a successful piece of writing. But as a business, the best advice I could give anybody is to be consistent with your voice. If you're all over the place writing about subjects that are not providing value to your business, you're not going to get the numbers and the traction that you're looking for. And you may get on those articles. I mean, I could write an article today on what a beautiful day it is out sailing on the lake or something, and I may get a lot of likes and shares off that article, but it has nothing to do with my business. So you have to have a clear idea of where you're going with what you're writing. And I think that's knowing who your customer is. I'm sure all of us at one time or another has gone to a website. Well, I'm not saying that there's, I'll use the example I used earlier when I was talking to Carmen and Stephanie. If you have a website and your product is you're an automotive repair shop and you have all kinds of information on your site about different colors of paints, different car shows that you went through, new cars that are coming out, how to build up your audio system, things like that, that is not money that is selling your, that is not content that's selling your services. So you need to step back a little bit. I'm not saying you should totally exclude that kind of content, but step back a little bit and see how you can either use that content to sell your services or come up with better content to sell your services. And by selling your services, I certainly don't mean something that says, buy from me, buy from me, buy from me. I don't mean that at all. I mean something that identifies with your brand, your customer, and can help you get business in the door.
Yeah. Well, and it's an interesting thing because we talked about it in the green room that what we really need is a plan, right? We need to understand where we want the logical progression to be with what our readers are doing, because like you said, if you get them all excited about new colors of paint, but you only fix tires, well, that's great, they're excited about new colors of paint, but it's not going to convert into any money.
Exactly.
And so, I don't know, are there maybe some tips that you could give us for creating just a really high-level plan so that at least we know every time we're writing something or communicating, we see how it connects into getting ourselves some sales or at least getting ourselves some good relationships with potential customers?
One thing that I have to say right from the bat about that in the planning is I'm a planning person, you're a planning person, Carmen's a planning person. There's a lot of people out there that are not planning people. So my first suggestion to those people would be if you need to hire somebody to do that plan for you. And the reason is because not having a plan and having a plan is going to cost you money to not have a plan. And I'm not kidding. It's going to take you longer to get done what you need to do. You'll be more sporadic with what you need to do. And also your vision's not going to be quite where it needs to be. So that's my first thing I want to say about the planning. Now, about actually developing a plan. the very first thing you have to do, and I know everyone hears this and is beat over the head with it, particularly in the marketing field, is know who your client is. Who is your audience? Use an example for the car repair shop. If it's a local repair shop, your audience is your local people. Primarily, it's not even true anymore, so I don't even say that. I was going to say primarily men, but that's not even true anymore. But it's primarily a certain age group, because most older people don't drive as much, so they're not as hard as on their cars. So if you say your age group is from 25 to 50, just get an idea of who your customer is, and then write towards them, plan everything that you do really towards them, and think of things that matter to them. If you are getting your airbags checked, it's going to be important to a mother with a bunch of kids in the car. Learning about great car seats, things like that. I mean, you kind of just trying to tailor it to your people, but in the meantime, in that article or blog post or whatever you're doing, make sure that you are pushing your business in some way. Stop by the shop. We'll give you a free evaluation of your car seats and make sure that you're being as safe as you need to be. Try to direct it somewhere to where it's working towards your business. So that's the very first thing, is figure out who you're selling to. The second thing is figure out how much time you have. How much time are you able to devote to the writing in your business? Because it's like we were talking earlier, there's so many levels of writing in the business. You have the writing on your website, you have the writing of promotional materials, you have emails that sometimes you have to be really careful about how you write those, especially if you're writing to a prospective buyer, or if you're trying to contact somebody that you need their influence on a project that you're working for. You really have to know how to use that language to connect with things like that. Any of your advertising materials, of course your blogs, anything like that. So you have to kind of decide where you're going to use your writing resources, how you're going to use them, and how much time you're going to devote to them. Because it's great to sit there on a Tuesday evening and say, you know what, I think I'll start a blog, and I'm going to blog 3 or 4 times a week. Well, unless that's what you're doing for a living, probably not. Probably not. So this is what I would try to say to that client. If you do blog, decide how many times, just once or twice a week, and then also keep in mind that you can take those individual posts and divide them up into other pieces that you can use. So when you're not blogging, you're still out there. It's very complicated, and in this show it's going to be real hard to kind of narrow it down, so I'm just kind of giving an overview. But really, first is your avatar, who you're selling it to. Second is the time you're devoting to it. And third is evaluate your skill level. If you don't have the skill level for writing, then hand it over to somebody who knows what they're doing. And I'm not just saying that because I write for a living. I'm saying that no matter what writer you hire on the planet, it could be even your wife or husband or somebody who just has a better command of the written word, but make sure that the writing is what it should be, because that's as representative of you as your logo. And it's even more dangerous because bad writing can get you into some trouble as far as your reputation and things like that go. So,
well, I wanted to kind of delve into that a little bit deeper. And at what point do you think it is that an entrepreneur needs to consider having somebody else write their content? And we're talking about website copy and web content, which I'll let you go ahead and explain to the audience the difference between those two. But at what point, I think a lot of entrepreneurs will go, well, I can write. I've graduated from high school, so I can write, and they'll kind of do it themselves. And I really think that there is a different skill to being able to write for the web versus even writing for print publications versus social media posting. So speak to that a little bit as to when is it a good idea to hire somebody or to get somebody else to do your content copy writing for you.
Okay, in my opinion, one is a time factor. If you don't have time to do it, because you're not going to usually write well if you're rushed. One is a time. And 2 is the knowledge. If you really don't understand, with every different type of writing, there are different styles and different ways to put the language together. So if you're not real intuitive on the writing and what you're writing to, then you may want to hire a writer. There was a couple things that you brought up there. One was the website copy and web content. The reason it's two different things, your website content copy is what is written on your website, where web content is anything out on the web. Now here's a big secret that a lot of people do not know about, and it's going to sound terrible when I tell it to you, but you'll understand it. When you're writing for the public, usually, unless you're in a highly specialized field, but if in general, when you're writing for the public, you should be writing towards somebody with a 9th grade education, a 9th grade reading level. And that is because we are all skimmers. And when we skim, that's easier to read and you take in the content faster. If you're writing at a postgraduate level, people have to really sit down, focus on what you're writing, and that becomes more of a research type thing. I mean, a real, like reading a book or something like that. But when you're doing the fast and easy web content, social media posts, blogs, even your website should be, actually the writing should be at a 9th grade level. Now I don't mean a 9th grader who has no grammar skills or anything like that. I'm talking about the language itself, the type of words you use, trying to make it clearer. And the other thing is that as you go through all these different types of content, each one has different formatting. So you have to be aware that you either have to learn that formatting or hire somebody who understands that formatting, because it does make a big difference. Headlines are very important. If you don't know how to write good headlines and you're trying to get some traction on on social media platforms, that's going to be a problem for you, because that's how people read. They look at the pictures and they read the headlines before they. I know people that'll even comment on posts before they've ever even read any of the written content.
I think we all know people that do that. God bless them. And one good thing that I think even you sent this to me, and I was going to tell the audience about it. There are third-party apps out there that can help you for lack of a better way to put it, dumb down your writing. Mm-hmm. And there's one called, I think is it the Hemingway app?
There is, and there's another great one called Ginger, Ginger. Mm-hmm. That is. The Hemingway app helps you to write concisely.
I think it also does the reading level too, because I've used it a few times. Yeah. And
there's also on I know one of the SEO programs plugins that I use on my WordPress gives you a readability. That Fleshman factor, that's the readability. But that Ginger app corrects grammar usage, spelling, punctuation, everything. It's really awesome, and it's free. I think there is a pro version, but it is free. It's really, I recommend that to anybody. But making sure, and you're right, when you get down to proofing and editing, you can write horribly in the very beginning, but then proof it and edit it. Take time with that. Another thing that too is if you're not a writer, but if you talk better than you write, which is many of us, use a voice-to-text application. I use in Evernote, they have a voice-to-text for the Android, but then there's also the Dragon products and things like that. It won't give you a perfectly edited piece of work, but it's much easier to go in and correct it and reformat it and change things around. At least you've got your ideas on paper. And also it's good if you have hired a writer. If you really have something important to say, if you do it that way and then send them that document, then they can go ahead and clean it up and make it, something that you can use. And that'll save you time, which will save you money.
Right. Well, and again, talking about the money, one of the questions I had for you is, let's say that we've gotten to the point where, because of time or because of our particular love or hate for writing, we've decided that we want to hire somebody. What are the things that we need to look for in a copywriter or in a ghostwriter, if it's a book, in working with somebody? How can we evaluate them other than just, do we get along with them? Do they seem to understand what we want to do?
Right.
Because a lot of times people I've seen, they work in many different industries, so they may have never written anything about finance.
Right.
That doesn't mean they're not a good fit for me, but how do I know if they're going to be a good fit, or what should I look for?
Okay, well, the first thing is a lot of people, and this is kind of controversial, because there aren't a lot of good writers that are on sites like Odesk and Fiverr and things like that. And I'm not real clear on why they're on there, but there are a lot of good writers that are on there, and they'll write for very low fees. That being said, there's a huge amount of bad writers, and many of them are doing writing content for English websites when English is their second or third language, so it loses, you know, something in the context and everything. I see it all the time. It just, when I get like the hairs on me stand up. But they do. But what this is what I do with my clients, and I write, if they want me to, I'll write them a spec piece. So they'll say, this is what I'm trying to do. This is what, you know, I'll have a long conversation. If your writer is asking you a lot of questions, listening to what you said, and automatically coming up with some good ideas, then you know you're kind of on the right path. Ask them to do a spec piece unless they already have some content that speaks to your industry or that you're happy with. And the other thing I do that a lot of writers don't do is I don't ask for any money up front. I don't get paid unless they're happy. And to this day, I still have not had anybody not pay me for the work. But I think that is good for you as a writer and making sure that you keep your game up. And then also for the client, I think that's an assurance, because it is a kind of, I can't think of the word. I'm a writer, right? And I can't think of the word I'm trying to think of. But it is one of those situations that until you have the product, you're not sure if they're going to be good enough or if they're going to do what you're looking for. So that's another thing. And if you get in a position with a writer where they're charging you for rewrites and all that, don't use them again. And because that's not right. They're supposed to be giving you a product, you know, something that you can use. So if they're charging you for their time to rewrite something you weren't happy with, to me that's a big red flag. So those are things I would look for. And the other thing is ask around. I mean, if you have people in your field that have hired writers, I work with several companies that do websites. And I do all their, so, you know, go to your website developer. Go to the people that are printing up your advertising or anything like that and ask them who they use, if they can recommend anybody. That's what I would say.
That's cool. Question about, you know, since we're kind of staying on this website topic, I know that with Google having done its algorithm changes, you've got Penguin and you know, the whole zoo of animals over there. How does, you know, content, you know, I think there's a fear out there that as Google continues to change the algorithm, I'm going to have to constantly be changing my content. And I think that maybe people are misunderstanding that if your content is good, the algorithm helps you. You know what I mean? So if you could kind of speak to what that, you know, when we hear about evergreen content, we tend to think of like taking a blog and turning it into, you know, posts and all this other stuff. But I think evergreen could also apply to your way. If you have good content, yes, it needs to be updated periodically, but you wouldn't have to worry about the algorithm so much.
No, that's a really good point. The thing is that, and I hope I don't offend any of my geeky friends out there. All the technical stuff is not as important as the message itself. I mean, it all helps, but the message itself, what's important. So are keywords important? Yes and no. Keywords are important because it gives the writer a direction for the content. They know what you're trying to express and helps them stay focused on that piece of content and not go off message. So yes, keywords are important. I do not like to read a piece of content on a website that says like the town and the state over and over and over. You know, so because that's what they were told the keywords is. You should put in Orlando, Florida. You should put in auto detail Orlando, Florida. So every few sentences it says auto detail Orlando, Florida. That's not good writing. You know, that's what your reward is good writing, because if you have good writing, people are going to share your content. They're going to pay attention to when you post things. They're going to read your website and believe in your ability to get whatever job you're trying to get done. I mean, that's what you want. You want to gain clients. You want to sell products. You don't necessarily want to be the first person that people see when they pull up the keyword for auto detailer Orlando, Florida. If you're working your business the way you should be, you're gaining clients because of your reputation and because you know what you're doing, and that's what all of your content should reflect, is those things. Why are you doing the great job that you're doing, and why are you the best? And so on that thing, all the numbers and everything, while they're important, the most important thing is the relationships you build with your content, if it gets you work, and if people care about what's actually being written that has to do with your business.
Right.
Was that kind of clear? Did that answer your question? Or?
Well, I think so. I mean, and I was telling you in the green room, I got into a little bit of a Facebook, you know, it was an argument, but just kind of a good discussion between professionals about the importance of keywords in content writing. And I think, you know, obviously, I'm a strategist, so I tend to think, you know, from a strategic perspective. And you know, the example that I used was, you know, if you're a dog groomer, and that's your business and your passion, you know what I mean? Not alone just your business, but that's really what you want to do. You've got some passion for making the dogs of the world look pretty. Then you know what that's going to come across in your writing, and you will naturally write about keywords that are applicable to your business. You don't necessarily have to go out and mine for keywords, you know, using Google AdWords and all that other stuff, you know, because I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, and we can all tell if you've done that. And let's say that they tell, you know, Google AdWords for whatever reason says that, you know what, people who have dogs have cats, so write about cats too. And so you start writing about something that's not passionate. It doesn't get shared. It doesn't get read well. Nobody clicks on anything. It doesn't work.
Right.
So, you know.
You're right. You're right. Don't use keywords and SEO techniques for the sake of using them. You know, worry about what your message is and what your content is. You can throw all the science you want at it, but at the end of the day, if the people that you're reaching don't care about what's being written, it's absolutely worthless to you.
Yeah, that's where having the plan and knowing what it is your end game is. You know,
exactly.
I want people to buy my product, or I want people to use my service, or I want people to support my cause, because we're talking about this in a business context, but it works equally well for nonprofits, for guys like that. You got to keep what your real goal is in mind. And ask yourself the question, when I choose to do this, is to taking the action I want? I think Carmen's the one, in fact, who said it in the green room. Carmen was talking about, you know, it's great to be #1 on Google, but what if you don't convert? You know, we talked about this a little bit with Ammon last week as well. Yep. It's great if you get tons of people to your site, but if nobody buys, you don't have a business.
Yep. And that's exactly you're exactly right. And it's during that planning process that you should develop your keywords and your message, and that's what will drive your content. And I'm not saying that you should never go off message. I mean, you can, but you have to use good sense about it. You know, there are other things that your audience cares about, other than if you were an auto repair place, tires and spark plugs, but you have to use some common sense. You know, of course, Will Rogers says common sense ain't so common, but yeah.
Wise man, Will Rogers. But I just want to take just a quick second and acknowledge some of the people in our audience. We have Terry Lee Brighton, I believe is how you pronounce that. I'm sorry, Terry, if I butchered that. But he's out in the audience. Hey, Terry, glad to see you out there. And he has a good question that I want to ask. And his question is, what of perhaps inexpensive hired writers and having editors in this loop as well? And I'm not sure I completely understand his question, but one thing I wanted to add also is that, you know, even marketing people hire other content writers. You know, just like, you know, I was in personal training for years and years and years, and personal trainers have trainers. We hire people because we need motivation and the different viewpoints and all of that fun stuff. And so do content writers. Content writers have other people write content for them too. So if you could speak to Terry's question, maybe you understand it from a different standpoint than I do.
Yeah, I think that what he was kind of asking is hired writers having editors, like having the work edited by somebody else. And it's a hard question to answer. To me, a good writer should be able to do most of their editing themselves. Now, I'm not talking about a book. I'm talking about everyday editing. But on the other hand, if you're doing a big project, let's say if your company is developing an ebook and you've hired a content writer to develop the content from past posts or whatever that you have, then I would hire an editor to go over that work. Any kind of large pieces of content, I would think bringing an editor would be a very good idea. But for the day-to-day stuff, maybe not so much. If I interpret that question correctly, if not, then Terry, ask it a different way, and I'll address it that way.
Well, and that leads me to a question that I'm struggling with myself, which is at a certain point, the feedback you want is from your potential clients, right? Those are the people who are going to tell you, yes, I connected with this, it resonated with me, it made me more interested. And I know that on a website, there are ways to measure that, and we talked about earlier, even on a social media post, by the conversation that gets started and things like that, there are ways to measure that. Is creating sort of a community of your inner circle or your client, almost like a focus group, for a big product company would have done. Does that make sense, as opposed to maybe paying for an editor who doesn't necessarily know your industry, or does that dilute the value of the information that they're going to give you?
It's such a hard question to answer, because let me give you an example. My dad offered to do some editing for me, and he's great at editing. But he was editing some blog posts for me. He could not understand the way a blog post is written, as far as the more relaxed tone that you use in a blog post. He could not get it. He's throwing in all these words, changing sentences, and all this. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm talking. You have to blog posting is, of course, you're getting cross information, but it's more informal. You're more like talking to a friend. You're having a conversation. Couldn't get that across him. So then you come into the whole thing about what kind of editors should you look for, and how much they charge, and all that. So it's like I said, it's a really hard question to answer. I think that if you have access to somebody who is not expensive, yes, but you still have to evaluate what's worth getting edited. I think you're on mute, Stephanie.
Oh, yeah, no, you're right. You're right, and I guess my question was, one of the substitutes would be something like we talked about with Ginger, or with even with Yoast. I don't know, people who use WordPress are probably pretty familiar with Yoast, but that'll give you a very quick readability level, and so if you set yourself some parameters, maybe that's good enough as you're starting out.
Now, if you're doing all your own writing, and then it's probably a good idea to hire an inexpensive editor to get you into breaking bad habits and to teach you good habits of writing. So if you had them work with you for X amount of time, to where you picked up on, there's things that I do that are so consistently bad, and I have to keep catching myself at them. I mean, just, there's some words that I can't, I don't even want to tell you, it's so embarrassing, but there's some words that I'll transpose the letters in every time I type them. Every time. For years. Don't know why, can't stop it. But if you have little bad habits like that, or it could actually be very educational to you to use a good editor. That's basically what I meant by that. Charlotte Pierce does my editing for me. She is like, within seconds, I'll put a blog post up, and she has said, you know, you misspelled that. You didn't do this. You didn't do that. So,
We all love Charlotte, yeah. Especially if it's, you know, words that wouldn't get caught by the editors. You know what I mean? So if you're using the wrong your or the wrong there regularly, you know, things like that that won't get spell checked. You know what I mean? Those are the critical ones that you definitely want to.
And another one you may not realize it's really critical is unnecessary words.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can say the same thing in a sentence. It's 10, 15 words long and maybe 8. It's better to use the 8 because you are trying to go for readability, and people have like this big of a short attention span, particularly if you're writing anything online. It's nothing like if they're sitting at their couch with a book in front of them. Two completely different animals.
Oh, yeah, and I got to find that infographic that was talking about the most commonly used unnecessary words in a sentence. Mm-hmm. It was things like very, you know, like you don't need to say that. There were some other ones in there that it really changed the way I write. You know, and it's funny because it's like if you start writing on Twitter, then that forces you to get rid of all these extra words because you only got 140 characters.
Terry I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Terry was just clearing that up. He said that he was asking if you should hire an editor also or expect the writer to have it all done. That really depends on the writer's experience. That really starts with the writer. You know, if they're doing a great job of writing and getting your message across, but it's not real well formatted or there are corrections, you have an editor look at it. But most writers who are selling themselves to writers can be their own editors.
Well, and you know, and I think one thing, I'm pretty sure you said it, but, you know, look at their writing that they've done. Ask for samples before you hire somebody. You know what I mean? And if you see that they are making these kinds of spelling errors and things like that, you know, are unacceptable to you and your audience, then obviously don't hire that person.
You know, I just thought of something else about hiring writers, particularly in business. Of course, everybody should have some writing samples available. But like myself, I don't have a lot of what I would call live writing samples, except for my own blog posts and things, to give people as examples. Because I've written, now it's close to 2,000 articles and blog posts, but they're for other companies in their voice. So it's not a byline. It's probably even more than that, actually. But it's not a byline that I can show somebody, because that is a agreement between myself and the client. So there's some confidentiality there. So I can't like say, oh, I wrote all the content for so-and-so's website, because that's written from their perspective. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you have to kind of keep that in mind when you're hiring a content writer, that a lot of the things that they write are for other people.
That's a good point. So if they if they tell you I don't have a whole lot of writing samples, that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Right. But then they should offer, at that point, if they don't have a lot of writing examples, they should be able to offer to do a spec piece for you. And like the thing is about content writing is that I don't even know how many different industries I've written for. You know, as far as, I mean, some of them are just ridiculous. I've written for plumbers, roofers, sinkhole fillers, doctors, lawyers, dentists. I mean, on and on and on and on and on. So if they tell you that and you haven't seen the work, the one thing you're going to know right off the bat is they are smart enough to figure out how to write in that particular field's voice. So that's a plus right there. If they are, you know, if they are able to take on that persona of that business. I think one day I was complaining to you, Carmen, because I had all these writing projects I was doing, and each time my brain would have to come to a screeching halt as I moved on to the next project that day, because each one was totally different than the other. There was no, and I mean, it's just like I felt like I was in a pinball machine. Everything was coming at me. But that's what I'm talking about. It's somebody who can write clearly in different voices.
You kind of got to have a little bit of multiple personalities. going on.
They'll hear you. They don't want anybody to know about them.
I wanted to take just a quick second. Mr. Kellen Flukiger is in the audience, and for some reason they're not showing up when I click the. That's interesting. Anyways, hi Kellen. Appreciate you joining us. And I heard that Kellen has a project going on over there where he's, write a book in 2 days, I believe it was, is what Stephanie was telling me. So that makes a great segue for us to kind of jump topics a little bit. We could sit and talk about website and content writing ad nauseum for months, I think. But I wanted to kind of to skip topics and let's talk about authorship a little bit. And one thing that I wanted to kind of start the conversation with is I think to me it seems like a fad that all of a sudden everybody now has to write a book. And I posted about it in Facebook. I don't think I put it over here, but it was like, a while ago, everybody had to have their own restaurant, like movie stars and whatnot, they opened their own restaurant. Then they decided that they wanted to have their own fragrance. So you had all these people that had fragrances, then they went out and did all of that. But now, and then it became reality TV. You have to have your own reality TV show. And now it seems like everybody wants to write a book, whether you have anything interesting to say at all. I honestly can't think of, some of the reality people that I would want to read their book. But why is it a fad, and what is it? What is it that people think is going to happen by becoming an author?
I don't think it's the fad, and the reason I'm going to tell you this is because people have been using books as their calling cards since way back when. I don't know if anybody's read this. Probably a lot of people have read it. Dale Carnegie's works, the books that he wrote, were all to power his business and to give himself more authority. The Rich Dad, Poor Dad books, same thing. Tony Robbins, same thing. The reason it seems to be so prevalent right now is because the ebook space has opened up to anybody. So more people are easy to do it. There's less pain points. You can sit down and you can write your book and get it published within a matter of days, if that's all you're doing. I mean, if that's just what your project is. Within a matter of days, you could go through that whole process. Where before, you had to find a publisher that was willing to publish your book, and then it was like, up to a year or more before the book was actually published. It was a lot more difficult to do. So I think that's why that space has exploded. Now, I'm going to talk as a consumer right now. I absolutely love it because I will read several books on the same subject. Like when I was trying to figure out Facebook, I had used Facebook years ago, could not stand it, but decided to go back because it speaks to the audience for my writing show. It speaks to them. So I had to really bring myself up to speed real quick. So I read several books that had to do with Facebook. Now out of those books, there were 4 or 5. Much of those books said the same things, but each book said things that the other ones didn't say. So to me, that's valuable. And because they're ebooks, I'm getting these books for a few dollars as opposed to nonfiction was always so expensive. If you went to the bookstore to buy a nonfiction book, it was going to cost you $13 and up. And I'm sure you're all aware of that. Where ebooks is the opposite kind of dynamic. A lot of the fiction is more expensive than the nonfiction. So I think that's what's happening is that space is opening up. Now, one caveat to that, there's a lot of bad writing out there. So you do have to read the reviews or already be turned on to the person who's doing the writing, like Stefan Hovnanian, how he does the Google Plus books. I would read anything that he writes because I know that he is so clear in his writing and so good at explaining some of the intricacies without making my head feel like it's going to explode, that there's a huge value there. So I think that's what the deal is with the ebooks. But in ebooks, see, the thing is, they're products. They're not necessarily, and that's how I would look at them as a business person. I'm not necessarily writing a book. I'm building a product. So that's the deal with that.
Yeah. and because of the quick turnaround that you were talking about, Laura, the fact that not only can you get it done quickly, but you can get it to market quickly, plenty of things that could never have been the topic of a book before, because nobody wants to read how to work on G plus a year from now.
Right.
That's not going to help them. They want to know now. It helps people take advantage of more of the opportunities that are very specific in their market. And the thing I think that's really changed with the ebook revolution is also the notion of a book doesn't have to be 400 pages. Before everybody had this idea, well, it's a book, it must be this ever, and people have come to accept something that I probably in the past would have been called more of a guide.
Yep.
It's fine that it costs $3.99, because if it gives you useful information, you're willing to pay that for it.
I read a book last week, one of the best books that I've read this year. And the reason it was one of the best books is because it had so much information in it that I had not considered before. Now, oddly enough, it was a book on writing. So me to say that with as many writing books as I read is really saying something. And I'd have to, let me see, I have it, actually writing, how good am I? Because what I do, and if anybody wants to know how to do this, let me know, is when I read on my Kindle, I highlight everything that's of interest to me, and then I go into Amazon and I print out my highlights. So then I have that information. But this one is called 2K to 10K, Writing Faster, Writing Better, and Writing More of What You Love by Rachel Aaron. And that is a good example of an ebook. It was not a huge ebook. I know, I could tell she spent some time on it, don't get me wrong, but she could build an entire career around that ebook, honestly, with as much information in there. It was so valuable that she could do, a whole series and break it off into little pieces and everything. Ebooks are amazing. If you have an idea or a thought that you think that you could develop into an ebook, I was just taking the time to do it, because it will help build your authenticity. It'll help build your authority in your space, and it gives you an enormous amount of content that you can move through your channels pretty rapidly.
Well, and the thing that I think is the most, not the most important, but one very important point is what you said about you viewing the book as just building another product. Because to me, when you look at it that way, it takes some of the scary part out of it for people who never thought of themselves as an author. But it also opens up a ton of opportunities, because if you think, some people learn when they see you talk, but some people learn best with a podcast, just when they hear. But some people learn best when they have a piece of paper in front of them. So really all you're doing is taking your message and providing your message to people in a new format so that they can get to know you better.
Right. I mean, you think about it, I know we kept going back to the auto repair guy. If he wrote a small ebook on how to keep your kids safe in your car, who mother wouldn't buy that, especially a new mother or first-time mother? If he showed in detail how to connect the car seat, what to look for, how to make sure there aren't any, strange emissions in your car, like carbon dioxide. I mean, all the things that you think of when you have a child in the car. Who wouldn't do that? And he would never. I mean, would he have ever thought he would be an author? No. But he created a product that he can use to bring customers to his door and build his authority.
I would so read a book on how to keep your car clean with children in the car.
You have to open it up, and a little man would come running out with a vacuum.
There's a car that has that now.
Yeah.
There's actually a vacuum. I think it's the Odyssey, right, with a vacuum built in the back. Oh my gosh. A mom's dream.
I know, right? Somebody was really thinking on that one.
I tell you, that would be the book I would buy that book every day, because it's
nobody needs to see a Cheerio when it's 3 years old. You know
what I heard though, when last winter when Atlanta had that freak snowstorm and it shut down the whole city and people were trapped in their cars, that's what they would find. It was that random Cheerio or that little Cheeto or
Stop it. That's terrible.
That was sustaining life on the Atlanta freeway.
Oh my goodness, that is too funny. Too funny.
But hey, I wanted to mention, Kellen had a comment out here that it's a little bit long to pull up, and it won't, comment tracker's being a little bit devilish today. But he makes a good point of it being more of a revival and not so much a fad. This tendency to more go towards authorship, which I think is a very good point. And it is, I think it's, Guy Kawasaki tends to use the term to democratize. So, it's a democratization of authorship, so that no longer do you have to be well-known, wealthy, any of that to be an author. And if that's what your passion is, then absolutely go for it. But I do think there are some people that, like you said, it's the junk stuff, that they're doing it for all the wrong reasons. They want to do it because J-Lo has a book, or because, whoever the star, I don't know if one of the Kardashians have a book, but, that's another one I probably wouldn't read. But, it's just for all the wrong reasons are they writing a book. So perhaps tell us what maybe some of the right reasons are to write a book.
The right reasons is if you really have a message that you think can be helpful to people. That to me is the most important thing. In other words, I'm not saying that people don't get traction with vanity books, but to me, the most valuable books are books that solve a problem. And honestly, you know what? That's not always nonfiction. I mean, that's sometimes fiction too, because sometimes some fictions can help you work through some thing that you're going through in your life. Do you know what I mean? It's more of an emotional thing. But yeah, I think that one has to solve a problem of some kind, and two, you have to be able to write in a clear and concise manner. What was that thing I put up earlier today? Good writing is clear thinking made visible. Mm-hmm. That would be the second thing, is to make sure that you can write like that. Now, a lot of people use ghostwriters, and there's several ways you can do that. One, you can have somebody ghostwrite the whole book, which if I'm going to ghostwrite somebody's whole book, it's going to be my own. But another way is that you write out the book, you write all the details, messages you want to get out, and you give that to a ghostwriter, and they build the story around it. They put it in a way that's understandable and that your reader can relate to. So you're basically giving them all the facts and everything that they need for the book. That's another way to do it. And a lot of people do take that opportunity to do that, and it can be pretty successful. There's a lot of ghost-written books out there that have done real well. And I think the other thing is to be true to yourself when you're writing. In other words, don't try to be somebody else. Don't try to be Seth Godin or what's that other guy's name? I can't think of it right now. But don't try Tony Robbins even. Don't try to be somebody else. Try to be who you are and be true to yourself, because that's going to come through in your writing.
Absolutely. That's a very, very good point. And I totally relate to what you're saying about the books that are fiction. Some of my favorite, and I think the stories or books that I learned the most from were actually kind of business fable stories. I really like The Alchemist. I really enjoyed, it's a guy named Patrick Lencioni, has a whole series of books, and they're, it's Getting Naked and The 5 Signs of a Miserable Job and all of this stuff, and they're done through a character and a story, but they have such great value in terms of the business character and what they learn. The Goal is another one that I really love, but it's a business fable. So I really like what you said about, that it doesn't have to be, just this is why I'm writing, and this is, very linear all the time.
What's so funny is that when I was a kid, and by kid I mean 15, 16, 17 years old, I went through a historical fiction phase, which I revisit every so often. But it was a type of historical fiction to where the heroine had gone through life and built these incredible businesses and empires. You know what I'm talking about? Those types of books. And it's so funny because after that, as I was growing up, that's always what I found myself doing, was helping people either build their businesses or working towards myself. And it's so funny how those things, and that there probably has a lot to do with me reading those books. I just thought it was so amazing these women could come from, the East End of London in such horrible times, the plague all around them, and then end up in these beautiful businesses that they built, in America or whatever. It was just amazing to me. But I think that any book that you put out should be a learning experience of some kind.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Now we are running towards the end of the show. We've said that we have just a few extra minutes. So those of you out there, we are going to hang on for just a little bit extra. So it might go 5 over, 10 over today. But this is great. This is great conversation, and so we definitely don't want to cut it short. So
Can I interrupt 1 second?
Go for it.
I just wanted to put this up that Kellen put up, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it. No, it's not. Oh, that was the pinning button. Let's try the I button.
Yeah, that wouldn't work for me, so go for it.
Yep, he says, my 2 cents, write a book because 1, you want to, 2, it's therapeutic for you, 3, you want to help others, and 4, you have something to say. And I think he put it a lot better than I did. That's why I wanted to point it out. He's absolutely right. Those are very good reasons to write a book.
Absolutely, and I think some of those are also shared. Guy Kawasaki has written a book on how to write, or is it how to do anything, or is it how to write a book?
Well, he has the one Ape, the author's publisher.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that I had the e version of that one, and it makes a lot of those same points. So absolutely, I think those are great reasons too. Now here's one of my last questions, and then I guess I'll let Stephanie kind of wrap it up with hers. But I think there's a difference between writing because you want to. Like I had when we lived in Jacksonville, I had this lady that lived across the street, and she was, everyone was like, "Oh, did you know she's a published author? She's a published author." And I'm like, "Really?" So I had a conversation, and I'm like, "What did you publish?" And she was like, "Oh, it's a book of poetry. I think like 5 people bought it, and 3 of them related to me." And I just said, okay. But I think it was probably a great thing for her at that time in her life, that to put that out, and it was an accomplishment, and so she can, pat herself on the back. And I'm not knocking her at all for doing that. I mean, that's something that a lot of people can't always even get to that point. Not everybody has to be a New York Times bestseller to accomplish their goal. But there's a difference between doing that and writing for a bit for money, you know what I mean? Because that's going to be your livelihood. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, like I know you and I are both fans of Nina Amir and her group, what's the difference? How do people make that distinction between writing for your passion and writing for your profit?
I don't know if there really is one, to be honest with. Well, I mean, like Nina puts it, you can write the book of your heart, and you may not make any money off of it. It may just go out to family and friends, and that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you want to make a living as a writer, you have to learn about the writing business, and that means how to write a book that can be part of a series or lead to other opportunities, things like that. So if you're writing a fiction book about like True Blood, if you're writing the Suki Stackhouse books, if you're writing a fiction book that's developing into a series, there's a lot that you can do with that. Or if you're writing a book that, let's say I wrote a book on some type of marketing book, and I was doing it solely so I could get speaking engagements. You have to be kind of clear on the why of your writing, so that you have that direction. But when you're doing it for a profit or a product, think about how that profit or product is going to help you build your business, and put it not just as, oh, I wrote a book, as a piece of your marketing plan. Did that answer that?
Yeah, I think. Okay, Carmen's muted, and I think. I mean, for me, it did. Did it get it for you, Carmen?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you. I mean, I just think that okay. There are people, I think it was Gayle King was talking about that she likes to sing, but nobody would pay her to do it.
Right. And if you like to write, whether you're going to publish or not. It's funny because I've had conversations with people, and it took me a while to when somebody asked me, what do you do for a living? It took a while for me to say I'm a writer. I said graphic designer for a long time because of this very same thing. The question I usually ask when I say I'm a writer, are you published? What have you? And I'm like, yes, I'm published, but I have not written a book. I said, but I write for businesses, and I tell them what I do. Then they kind of get it. But when they ask you if you're a writer, they very rarely mean the type of writing I do. They do mean have you published a book? So it took me a while to figure out my response to that before I would actually say I was a writer, which may not have been the right thing to do, but that's how I felt about it.
Well, but what I think is really interesting, Laura, is that, right, which is with Kellen's comment and with, you know, some of the other things that we've said today, is ultimately if you don't see how writing the guide or the ebook or whatever is going to advance what you're really trying to do, whether it's, you know, your personal passion or it's building your business, then it's a lot of energy to waste. You know, take that energy and use it to write blog posts or use it to improve the copy on your homepage. But if you feel that writing the book or the guide or whatever is going to be a new product for you, then go for it.
Yeah. There's Nina Mir has a very good book called Blogging a Book. And if you're writing a bunch of blogs for your business, that is a must read, I think, because a lot of times you may be writing a book and not even know it. So you've got all that content. Let's say you've been writing, you know, 2 or 3 posts a week on gluten-free cooking for the past year. Why not take the best of the best and put them into a book, into chapters, and write the book? You know, that's a really interesting thing about this ebook space, is that can happen. It makes me kind of sad to think about how many people were deterred from writing really good books because it's so difficult to break through in the publishing space 10 years ago. You know, it's just, I hope they're finding their voice now.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, to me, that's one of the changes in publishing, is that now, you know, like Carmen said, it's been democratized. And so if you have a way to get that message out, it's up to you to create that message in a way that gets you closer to your goals, I guess is my takeaway.
Right. Yep.
Cool. Well, there are plenty, I had a whole list of other questions I wanted to ask you, but I know we're out of time.
We got time for one more. If you want to throw one more at her, go for it. Pick one. Hurry up. No.
Okay. Well, I guess my question for you really is, when we're feeling bad about what we're doing and when we're saying, oh, this is so confusing and I don't understand what to do and I just want to chuck it all, is the right thing to do in the face of that feeling to just keep writing and let it all come out and fix it later, or is the right thing to do to step away?
Personally, I would chuck it all and I would start over. Because if I'm not finding the voice in the story in something's wrong. And sometimes I wouldn't throw it away. I mean, I would still have what I wrote, you know, in case I need to refer back to it. So don't, you know, push delete. But, yeah, I would start over from a fresher standpoint, and maybe it'll start to make better sense to you. Because what it might be is that you're not asking yourself the right questions when you're doing the writing in the first place. Or you're writing too much from your perspective and not enough from your reader's perspective. There's a lot of things that could be causing that kind of conflict. So yes, my idea is, yes, toss it and start over, even though you may bring in elements of it back into what you're doing.
Okay, thank you.
It might not be what you wanted to hear, Stephanie, but there you go.
No, well, but ultimately, and this is you know, where to know that and to say to yourself, okay, you know what? I'm just going to quit wasting my energy on this, trying to make it fit, and I'm just going to start over, because at least that way I know my energy is going towards something constructive instead of just creating more frustration for myself. So.
No, and is that anything in life really, I think, is that way. If you're beating your head against the wall, it probably wasn't meant to happen anyways. So if you're using all that negative energy, you're not opening yourself up to the positive energy where something good could come in and, you know, fix the problem anyways. So yeah, that's my idea on that.
Absolutely. So here's I'm sorry, a little bit of a lightning round since we're already over, but we'll go over for just a few more minutes. What book are you reading right now that you would recommend that people read? Now I'll let Laura answer first. Stephanie, go get a book. You're gonna have to get one too.
I am actually, that's such a hard question for me because I read like 4 books at a time. But I am reading Mr. Mercedes by Stephen King right now. That's my big one that I'm reading.
That's a fun one. Okay, Stephanie, what are you reading?
It's scary.
It's Halloween. You can go with it.
I am actually reading The $100 Startup by Chris Guillebeau.
The $100
I've
Startup.
had kind of a hard time. Yeah, I've had kind of a hard time getting into it, but now that I'm into it, I'm glad I'm reading it. So I can't give it a wholehearted recommendation yet, but from what I've read so far, it's pretty good.
I am. I just downloaded, haven't read it yet, is The Curve. That was recommended to me by, I think it was Penny Sanseviera. And it's about when should you do free and when you shouldn't do free and where that falls as you're developing your products and things like that. So I think that's what it's about. That's what, like I said, I haven't started reading it, but that's kind of the context of the conversation we were having when she brought it up.
That would be a good one. It's been on my short list for a long time, and I'm just now getting to it. Is reading Think and Grow Rich. So I'm reading that one. I just finished The Alchemist, and I'm kind of like Laura. I have a couple. I'm reading was it the Capitalism in the 21st Century, I believe, and that one's a really long, toothy economics book, and so I have to take a break from that. I can't just read and read and read and read. So.
And it's by a Frenchman, Carmen. So it's definitely not. I can tell you all kinds of stuff about that.
yeah. I saw something. I didn't know he was French, and so I went online. There was something like the author was speaking someplace, and so I went to look at it. And then when he started to talk, I was like, oh wow, that's gonna make it even harder. I'm sorry. So I don't think I watched all of that presentation.
Can I make one thing? If you want to learn how to write well, read. Read, and read about the people that are, read the books that people are writing the same subject that you would like to write. Because then you can find out where the holes are in their philosophies and their ideas, and maybe you can fill those.
Absolutely. That's a great point to kind of end with. So real briefly, tell us about your HOA and what you've got going on and where we can find you.
I do the Writing Biz on Wednesday nights at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. It's a show to help writers grow and manage their businesses. This week we are doing one on book marketing and using special avenues for book marketing, and I have John Kramer on as my guest, so it should be a really good one. And this will be the end of my book marketing series, and then we're moving on to blogging, so that'll be starting next week. So then that'll be a 3-part series on blogging. And then I have a few things before the end of the year, but not series, actually. They're just kind of different little subjects I wanted to touch on. So.
That's great. And Stephanie,
that's thewritingbiz.com. That would be helpful, wouldn't it? Thewritingbiz.com is where you can learn more information about that. And then my writing business is goodinklings.com.
All right, so we got 2 websites. Stephanie, what are you up to real quick?
I am still in the process of creating a series of workshops for small business owners to understand their financeability, and I'm hoping that's going to be out in the next few weeks. If you've got questions about financeability or you want to understand what it means for you and your business, hop over to finance-ability.com and you can take the assessment and learn more about it.
Stephanie has been kind enough to give me a little sneak peek of what she's working on, and it is good stuff. So any of you over there, any of you entrepreneurs who are wanting to understand more about how much your business is really worth and how to change that in the direction you want it to go, well, obviously we want it to go up, I would definitely recommend that you take a look at what she's got. So that's good stuff over there. And of course, those of us over here at Rojas Consulting, no problem, are always busy working on strategy and helping people to figure out how to get from where they are to where they want to be. So I would encourage everyone, go to www.rojasconsulting.net. We actually just put out a new marketing strategy guide. It's a Kickstarter. It's designed to help you start thinking about your marketing strategy so that when you are ready to set down and write out your marketing strategy for 2015, you've got some good information to start with. So go over there, and we'll post links. All of you post links to the books you mentioned, your websites, all the projects you're working on, so that our lovely fans out there can have access to that. If there's nothing else, I want to thank everybody for watching, especially those of you who have hung on for the last few minutes here. I really, really do appreciate it. Next week, we will be wrapping up our roadmap to entrepreneurship, and Cher Jones will be on to talk with us about social media and how we can use that as entrepreneurs. In particular, how do you get the traction that you want on social media when you're starting from literally zero? So Cher will be on to talk about that, and so we are really looking forward to having her on as a guest as well. So make sure and keep an eye out for those invitations. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see everybody next week.
Yep. Thank you.
Goodbye. Oh.